The following is a Hoop Ball presentation. Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
Well, I'm getting there, friends. I'm getting there. It sounds a little bit better today. I still have minimal ability to get enthused about what I'm talking about, but we're on the mend, I think. I don't know. Tea and Sudafed and Tylenol and Robitussin. You pour all those things together and you feel a little better, and then you end up with a tummy ache. It's Wednesday. It's Fantasy NBA Today. Dan Besbris and Brandon Marcus here to carry me through. I needed Neil to hoist me up onto his shoulders yesterday. You ready to carry my very small frame through this podcast?
Yeah, just because you have a tummy ache, though. That's the only reason why. I don't want to do anything besides just take care of you while you have this little tummy ache.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Can you bring me some matzo ball soup, please?
Oh, man, the best. That is truly the best. I actually had it twice this past weekend, so I'm an extremely lucky man.
Yeah, we're I don't know if people realize this, but Hoop Ball sort of stumbled our way into a good boatload of Ashkenazi folks. So there was a lot of matzo ball soup and just matzah in general getting passed around the Hoop Ball ranks over the last couple of days. You have a good weekend? You have a good Pesach?
I did. I had a Seder on Friday night, had a Seder on Saturday night, said goodbye to a couple of friends who are moving to the East Coast after my Seder on Saturday night. And then Sunday, I did something. I forget what I did, but yeah, I did something. Oh, I watched the Clippers lose, and just Shai Gilgeous-Alexander show me how excited he is to be a Clipper and how excited I am to have him as a Clipper for the foreseeable future, and how I want no part of him in a trade for Anthony Davis. No part.
Interesting. All right. Well, Clippers are in a tight spot right now. I think is probably the kindest way to put it. Let's loop our way through the playoffs a little bit, because yesterday was amazing. We had a couple of teams get eliminated, which I think everybody sort of saw coming. Brooklyn losing in Philadelphia, Orlando likewise in Toronto. Those series are done. A third series also came to an end last night, and it was amazing. Portland 118, Oklahoma City 115. I want to spend like half of today's show talking about this game. I know it's not fantasy related, but how incredible was Damian Lillard in that ball game from every respect? Just like, oh my God, the swagger, Brandon.
He was unbelievable, and it's funny because I haven't watched a ton of NBA playoffs. I've watched some games, and I would like to watch more, except that once the fiance comes home, it's really a battle. I got to pick my battle in terms of which games I want to watch, and if it's a Clippers game, I'm going to watch that one. So once the 7:30 hits, then most of the time I'm stuck watching, the Challenge and X on the Beach and that kind of good stuff. So we have got to make compromises.
I have no idea what those things are you just said.
That's sad for you. Good television, good crappy television. But last night I actually got the pleasure of turning on the Portland game for the final 5 or 6 minutes after we were done with our TV watching. As the Sharks game, by the way, I don't watch a ton of hockey either. But did you see what happened in that one really quickly?
I did not. I just know sports were going crazy last night.
Okay, so basically I'll summarize it in 2 seconds.
Yeah, that's fine.
Vegas Golden Knights were up 3-0. They committed a penalty, 5-minute major, and when you score on that power play, it keeps going. Doesn't just end like it normally does for a 2-minute power play. So the Sharks scored 4 goals during that 5-minute power play to go up 4-3. Vegas then tied it with about 40 seconds left, and it went to overtime, and the Sharks won. So,
wow.
Pretty crazy. Yeah, but anyways, Dame Lillard.
And yet, somehow, that wasn't the craziest thing that happened last night.
Which is just mind-blowing. The amount of, like you said, swagger and a fire engine is just here to show the swagger.
You okay over there?
Yeah, things are good.
Okay, good.
I just couldn't believe how one guy could just dominate a game, and someone that we don't talk about that much. I mean, we talk about Westbrook. We talk about LeBron. We talk about Paul George. We talk about Harden. But not enough credit goes to Damian Lillard. He's probably one of the most underrated players of our generation. And that's not hyperbole, because he is truly, in fantasy, he's a first or second rounder, a stud every year. You can count on him playing almost every single game. It'll take a lot for him to sit. And this guy just put Portland on its back. he said enough after Game 3 when Dennis Schroeder and Russell Westbrook were teasing the Blazers, and he took care of business. It was nasty. It was lovely. It was phenomenal, and I'm pumped for the entire Moda Center and what they got to witness.
Yeah, I think one of the things I want to grab onto there, and there's a lot of stuff that I want to talk about with Damian Lillard, the point you said about him just playing. He plays every game. He plays every game. His career low in games played is 73, and this was his 7th full season in the NBA. That's amazing in the modern era to have a guy who just, I mean, I guess James Harden is actually fairly similar in durability standpoint, but his leadership from that perspective of just going out and grinding it out every single night. He tied his career high in field goal percent this year at 44.5. He's a 91 free throw percent guy. His career, he's around 90%. He's just, like you said, his consistency is through the roof. And I talked about it on yesterday's show with Neil that I took the under for the Blazers on the season win total this year. It was one of the ones that I missed by the most out of all of my misses, and there weren't that many this year, because I thought they were going to suffer from a measure of stagnation, and Dame just doesn't let that happen. He just goes out there and he wills everyone to play hard around him, which is just, it's one of those kind of intangible things that other leaders in the NBA can't quite pull off, and I kind of feel like I just need to tip my cap to him because what he did in the regular season was amazing. That team ending up in the 3 seed in the Western Conference is just insane. And then what he did in that game last night was just so cold-blooded. The wave, the stare at the camera when he's getting mobbed. That
was beautiful.
It was like a meme. He knew he was making a meme as it was happening. Everybody screaming around him, looking crazy, and he's just staring longingly into the camera's eyes.
There's so much to unpack from that final 15 seconds about how fitting it is that Westbrook was the one that took the last shot when he was 10 for 30, I think it was, from the field, and he decided to take the last shot while George, I think, was 14 of 20. So, and he just took some random shot where he charged in the lane, like 2 or 3 guys were there, threw it over his shoulder. It didn't go in. Just typical what has happened to the Thunder and why they sank to the bottom of the Western Conference with this guy who is not a true point guard in terms of scoring and being efficient scoring. And then for Lillard to just come down, I legit thought that he lost track of time. He was standing there, and there was 1 second left, and I thought, oh my God, he's not going to get a shot off. And then he shoots it and makes it. And like you said, the wave, getting dogpiled, and then after the game, just saying, you know what, it was time for them to go home. They started chirping after Game 3. They were pointing to their wrist, and I just decided to take the shot. And then PG saying it was a bad shot, just hammering the bad shot. I mean, give me a break.
Yeah,
it's not a bad shot when Damian Lillard shoots like 40+% from there. And a fun stat, by the way, Trae Young, Steph Curry, and Damian Lillard from, I think it was 30 to 40 feet is what I saw the stat was, 38% from the field.
That's crazy. I guess that's what happens when someone doesn't get out and guard you that far away. Although they sort of were in yesterday's game. Wasn't Paul, I mean, he kind of Harden sidestepped for the shot over Paul George. It's, as a Laker fan, and so you get to mention the Clippers, so I get to mention the Lakers. This is the second time that Damian Lillard has eliminated a Lakers foe with a last-second playoff dagger. He took care of Dwight Howard, whatever it was, 5 years ago with a series-ending shot like this, and now he did it to Paul George. So I almost don't care how many times he does it to the Lakers. He's now one of my favorite players in the NBA.
Yeah, 100%. And now PG's got to wonder what he's doing in Oklahoma City because I don't think they're going anywhere with the team they currently have put together. And Westbrook very possibly could be someone you maybe trade during the offseason because I'm not sure you can win with Westbrook as your starting point guard. He's an incredible player. There's no doubt about it. But he's not efficient and he's not a good shooter. And in today's NBA, you have to have a point guard that can shoot the basketball.
Yeah, I went against my own reasoning, and I feel like you did a good job of buffering your statement there, so I'll do the same thing. We love Russell Westbrook. He's incredible. Yeah. He's maybe the most electrifying player in the entire NBA. But I went on a number of podcasts, my own included, about a year ago, and I said, this team has a narrow band of where they can end up over the course of a year, over the course of a playoffs, because of Russell Westbrook. There's a ceiling and there's a very high floor, and they're just never going to get out of that band because of his lack of efficiency but insane athletic ability. So they're never going to be bad because Westbrook is crazy and he can do amazing things, but they're also never going to be great because he's always going to make these like bull in a china shop type decisions in crunch time. Their best run all season long was when he was deferring to Paul George, was when he was racking up assists and he was taking efficient looks near the bucket, and George was scoring whatever it was, 35, 40 points a night. But we saw it again, Brandon, when crunch time comes, he wants to be the one taking the shot. And, it's a funny thing because I don't know if we can call ourselves the media, but the large media, they love to kill LeBron for passing in crunch time. And I think we also like to kill Westbrook for shooting in crunch time. And it's not necessarily a double standard. We always felt like the guy should be doing the thing he's better at. And LeBron is a 50% shooter. He should be shooting. Westbrook should be passing in crunch time because he's got guys on his team that when they're open, it's just an easier bucket for them. I get it. I get that mindset. I watched Kobe Bryant for 20 years in L.A. It's a similar mindset, but he's a better shooter from the perimeter.
It's not even close. He's a much better shooter.
So, I mean, I'm with you. It's the wrong time to sort of pile on Westbrook because he looked bad in the playoffs again after he and his team got punked by Joe Ingles last year. But at the same time, I think you're right. I don't know that they can get over that hump as long as he's the guy leading that team. But I don't know what they can do about it because didn't they have the highest payroll in the league last year?
I'm not sure what it was, but I know they're paying a lot, obviously, between Westbrook, PG, and Steven Adams. And obviously, Adams' game paid a lot and doesn't contribute a ton offensively. But that being said, he's great defensively, gets a ton of steals, he's active, and now we're at a place where OKC is really stuck between a rock and a hard place. I mean, I don't think they know what to do.
I know that Lakers fans everywhere are just hashtagging unfinished business right now, and it is kind of funny that Paul George was like, we got this thing we need to finish, and now damn well he's staring down the barrel of it and thinking, holy crap, we couldn't even get past Portland. They were literally a one-man gang in this postseason. They didn't have Yusuf Nurkic. I, like many, didn't think they were going to win this series, and they stomped them 4-1. Portland has a very decent path to the Western Conference Finals because they're now waiting on the winner of Denver and San Antonio. That's a winnable series for the Blazers. I mean, Brandon, the whole thing is insane. I don't know that I've even properly introduced the podcast, but if you recall, on the last day of the regular season, Portland tried to tank their way into not playing the Thunder in the first round. How did this happen?
Yeah, and then they ended up playing the Thunder, and everyone thought, oh, here comes the Thunder. The Thunder are going to go to the Western Conference Finals. They're going to take on the Warriors because obviously we have the Rockets and the Warriors in round 2, and that's what's causing this chaos is because we're going to have one of Denver, San Antonio, OKC, or Portland in the Western Conference Finals, which is crazy to think about, but that's what happens when Houston falls to that 4 spot, and it's caused chaos out west. And so as much as we're looking forward to that Eastern Conference and seeing the Bostons, the Milwaukees, the Torontos, and the Phillies lining up, which should be obviously a great next round, the West really is wide open, and this really does favor the Warriors, which is crazy to say, even without Boogie. But you got to think that whoever wins that series between the Warriors and the Rockets is going to go to the NBA Finals.
Amazing. I'm cavelling here because the first round was not inspiring me, and now all of a sudden I feel pretty amped up about the whole thing.
And you know what's funny, by the way, Dan, is that we had 3 elimination games yesterday. 2 of them were utter blowouts, like not even close.
Yep.
I think that Brooklyn scored for the first 6 minutes, and I think Toronto was up by like 20. It was like 23-3. I'm making that up, I think, but it was very close to that. I mean, it wasn't close, and 2 teams laid down, and then we had Lillard just take it to OKC, which is absolutely incredible. And we talk about OKC, and I think this is correct, that in their last 19 playoff games, OKC is 4-15.
Whoa. If that's true, that's rough.
I think they were up 3-1 against the Warriors, I think is what it was. And then since then, I think they're 4-15.
That is a bad indictment. I know that, the stats, the anti-Westbrook stats are really piling up, and I think maybe it's going a little bit too far, but he really should not be the number one option. I think that's what we're seeing when,
Yeah, it should have been George that took that last shot. And as much as we're talking about OKC, obviously the hero of last night is Lillard, and he's incredible. And when you're looking around 2 in your draft and Lillard somehow is still there and you're wondering, oh no, should I take a guy that might get hurt or should I take somebody else that obviously has high upside? Be happy just taking the guy that's solid and you know is going to be in your lineup from day one until the final game of the season.
That was an expert pivot, by the way.
Yep.
That's
how it's done, Dan.
that is an expert pivot into fantasy stuff. So I guess we can probably talk about that now. Although I do want to cover Denver, San Antonio briefly here at some point. Dan Besbris, Brandon Marcus. I am at Dan Besbris on Twitter. He is at BD Marcus. Can you hear? I almost have my voice back. I feel like I graduated from.
You're excited.
I know. It sounded like I was going through puberty on yesterday's show, and today I feel like I sound like a party girl. So that, to me, is that's progress, if nothing else. This is Fantasy NBA Today, a Hoop Ball and Hawaiian Isles Kona Coffee presentation. Check them out at hawaiianisles.com, at HI Kona Coffee on Twitter, or you can get that good stuff sent straight to your doorstep. Amazon Prime. You'll have that in 2 days flat. Actually, I think you can have it in 1 day if you order $35. Isn't that what they've got going on these days? That's a pretty sweet deal. So check that out. Hawaiian Isles Kona Coffee. They are our proud partners here of all audio, visual, everything at hoop-ball.com. Very briefly, before we get into the fantasy stuff, because I think your point on Damian Lillard is one that I push hard on an annual basis, and now I'm starting to have some of the numbers to back it up, and maybe that's actually what we'll talk about today. I had another idea, but I might change mid-flight here. Denver looks a lot better since they moved Torrey Craig into the starting lineup and Will Barton to the bench. Their home court seemed to be a big deal. Can they wrap this up in 6, or are they now? Is Denver, you think, going to be kind of counting on just coming home and winning Game 7 in their own arena?
Denver's the better team. Pop has done an incredible job this season. He really does have Aldridge, and he has DeMar. And besides for that, as much as we were on Derek White, and he was just incredible in, Game 2 or Game 3, whatever that was, where he scored 30-plus points, he just came crashing down, and that's exactly what happened this season, as he had this huge stretch, and then he just fell apart towards the last couple of weeks of the season. So it's tough to count on a guy who is as young as Derek White.
Right.
And for Denver, they've got the talent. They've got the shooting. Between Joker and between Jamal Murray, who's been a bit inconsistent, obviously, and Barton, and Millsap, you've got the guys there. Gary Harris, too. But just that starting 5, obviously, Torrey Craig now in the starting 5. But just those guys, they've got enough shooting and scoring where they should win. And I'd be scared if I was Denver and I lost tonight, because having Pop go against you in a Game 7 just screams danger.
Yeah, that's a good point. You really want to push that thing as far as it can go. That's where the pressure gets amped up, and then the guys that have the confidence are the ones that get over the hump. You can hear my voice, by the way, starting to fade here, even by mid-show. I'm going to clear my throat while I ask you the following question. You mentioned Dame Lillard as the safe option in the first 2 rounds. I love to draft very conservatively through the first 2 or 3 rounds. Who are maybe 1 or 2 other names you think that fall into that same category as guys that get overlooked because they're just there, and they're always there, and people want to venture out and grab the next big thing? I can never advocate that, but now I need to go clear my throat.
Oh, man, that's a good question. One that I actually didn't think about. And, obviously, this year, a guy that I thought was going to be consistent was Kemba Walker, but he continues to improve, so you can't really say that. You need somebody that's going to be consistent, you can count on, and will probably give you top 2-round value as someone that you kind of lean on. And normally a guy like Jimmy Butler is someone that kind of fits that bill. And then also nowadays, Rudy Gobert probably is another guy that is going to give you those points, rebounds, blocks, field goal percentage. So those are 2 that stand out for me.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. 100% on that. But Dame, I guess, is sort of he's the one that's the cut above, because it's always the same thing. He's always like, he's there at the turn of the first round, and someone's going to go do something crazy. I gotta go get the guy that might make a leap into the later middle part of the first round. And every once in a while, it pans out. I would argue that Joel Embiid might be an example, and obviously he missed the last 3 weeks of the regular season, but he might be an example of a win in that regard had he played another 5 games. He was getting drafted generally in that 12 to 15 range, and then he ended up with top 10 value on a per-game basis. So there's one example that we can think of guys that consistently get drafted in the second round, and if you had reached for him, it actually paid off. But almost every time, if you just take Damian Lillard at 9, 10, or 11, you're going to end up with a very comfortable draft pick. And so yesterday, Brandon, and I just want to dabble in this a little bit, because I have data now that can last us for many, many podcasts, and I don't want to use it all up right at the shoot, but I'm going to give you a couple of numbers here. I went through the top 100.
Yep, saw you doing that on Twitter.
Oh, yes, and then I had to tweet about it because I had no voice, so I had to find something to do with myself yesterday afternoon. And I was pulling up basically Yahoo's pre-rank, the players' final rank on a per-game basis. I haven't done the totals yet, but obviously that'll make some slight adjustments. But you know what, for Roto perspective, unless there was a guy that missed half of the season, you make these slight adjustments late in the process. This was more about how they were performing when they were actually on the floor. And not surprisingly, every single round, the average result of a player was lower than their pre-rank position. It's almost impossible to end up above it. It would have to be, the second, third, fourth round, something like that, or a little bit later where you get a couple of guys that are really, really good and nobody that's really terrible. It just doesn't happen because, in the first round, a guy gets drafted number 1, they cannot actually overperform the top few guys. It's mathematically impossible.
Right. Harden did match number 1, by the way, which just shows you how good he was.
Yeah, he and AD were up there at the top 2, and then Steph actually was pre-ranked 4 and ended up number 4 as well. So, one thing that was determined, once again, is that the top 10 in particular are usually fairly accurate. You shouldn't do something crazy inside the top 10. Russell Westbrook was actually the weird one there. He was pre-ranked 10 and he finished number 31. But otherwise, things were fairly predictable inside the top 10. Harden, Davis, Giannis was number 3 overall. He finished 5th. Steph was a perfect match at 4. Kat, pre-ranked 5. He finished at 6. KD finished at 9. And then there was a little bit of fluctuation here. LeBron was pre-ranked 7. He finished at 19. Jokic, 13. Dame was pre-ranked at 9. He finished at 12. Again, on a per-game basis, Westbrook was the clunker there. And I'm just going by 10s because it's easier than going by 12s. Obviously, we can get into the overperforming Paul George. He falls into the next chunk at another time. But I think the lesson here comes back to what you said. Generally, if you take the safe plays early in your draft, that gives you a really nice, stable foundation to build off of, because there are very few guys after you get outside the top 12 that really overperform by enough to where an early reach is a good idea. And so the numbers do back that up. Inside the top 10, this is, by the way, including Russell Westbrook, who was negative 21. The top 10 only missed, on average, pre-ranks Yahoo by 4.5. So you're pretty wise to stay within about 3 or 4 guys of where they have them pre-ranked early in your draft. Agree or disagree?
Agree. And this is where it helps, where you actually watch the game and kind of know a little bit about these players. I have it ranked based on head-to-head style, so our numbers are a little bit off.
Right.
But one thing that I kind of want to chime in on is you mentioned LeBron, and I think you said 7 and 19. For some of these guys that are getting older, it is worth mentioning their age. So them not being on the court hurts your fantasy team. So a guy like LeBron, who was pre-ranked 7, in head-to-head, 9 cat, he finished 67 total, which is, I mean, he wasn't there down the stretch when you needed him. So that's one thing, is you want to look at health for some of these guys as well. But going off what you were saying, I mean, you look at, let's say it's the third round. and you get towards guys like Butler and Beal, and then you see guys maybe a little bit later on, like Otto Porter and Draymond Green were pre-ranked 30 and 31. If you watch, you know those guys are kind of hit or miss, so I kind of want to stay away from those types of guys. But then a couple picks later, you have someone like Marcus Gasol, who you know has been steady. LaMarcus Aldridge, you know is steady. DeMar DeRozan, you know is steady. So no need to go crazy and try and go after a guy that really does have a high variance of being either a top 10 guy or a 70 type guy when you can get the guy you know is going to finish in the top 40.
Yeah, completely agree. And oddly enough, and I don't know if you picked number like 35, 40 as your range there, but that's what the numbers bore out as I was going through this stuff. Basically, I almost feel like I can come up with, like the Mason-Dixon line. We had the Gary Harris line in drafts this last year. He was pre-ranked 44. He finished at number 167 by average, and it was pretty close to that by totals as well because he missed half the season. Once you hit number 46 this year, it was almost a complete and total crapshoot, like a mind-boggling swing where all of a sudden, and you could potentially even say it starts around Jamal Murray at number 40, but you do have a couple of guys in there that are fairly consistent. Miles Turner, Al Horford were pretty predictable. John Collins, Conley, Jason Tatum were picked in that next 10 range. But as you get to Gary Harris at 44, you start to see this wild variance. You mentioned variance. A lot of the guys before that are actually pretty consistent, and you can kind of pick out the names of guys that aren't, whereas after you get past Gary Harris, it flips, and you start to see, okay, well, now I can see almost all these guys have high variance, and I can start to pick out the guys that don't. And I do think that going safe through that area is still a really good idea, but, and I make 2 points at the same time here, what it also tells us is you don't really have to go based on where the pre-ranks might be telling you to go. You go find the guys that you know are safe plays, even if they're pre-ranked 10, 15, 20 slots lower, because what we've determined here over the last couple of years is there comes a point in all of these drafts where Yahoo just doesn't know what their numbers mean anymore. And I don't know where they get all of their data. I think one of the larger sites provides them with it. But there comes a point where you and I, Brandon, we know just as much as whoever's feeding the numbers into the system.
Right. And if you look at a guy, let's say you're picking at 54, 55 or so, and you've got Ingles, Dragic, maybe Millsap, Teague, and you're like, I don't really love any of those guys. Feel free to go after Julius Randle, who's projected at 72. When you just saw him play for the Lakers and dominate down the stretch, you know he's going to be starting with New Orleans or getting heavy minutes with New Orleans. Go ahead. You know you're going to get those points, the rebounds. You're going to get some threes. Go ahead and go after him because you know that he's not going to hurt you. Whereas a guy like Chris Dunn, who was very hit or miss last year, could hurt you, and he's one pick later.
Yeah, how about Nick Vucevic as an example of a guy floating around?
Number 5, didn't he?
He on a totals basis, and on a per game basis, not much worse. He was number 11 overall, and this was a guy who was pre-ranked 59, despite being number 27 on a per game basis the previous season. And yes, he only played 57 games. So if you were ignoring him, you probably did so based on the notion you thought maybe Orlando was going to tank and he was going to get traded. I don't know that many of us thought they were going to make a push into the 7th seed, but with health, he was easily a top 30 guy, even coming out of the prior year. Like, he didn't even have to do anything else to be inside the top 30, except play another 15 games, and he was falling into that 50 to 60 range. This is a spot where you can look at a guy and go, I have the portfolio. I have the data here to show me that he can do better than where I'm taking him. Why would I want to take a guy like Goran Dragic, like you mentioned, who was not very good the previous year, or Ricky Rubio, who was good for like the last month and a half, but was terrible for the first 4 months of the previous season? If I can take a guy where I literally just saw him put up an entire, when healthy, year of top 30 value, and I don't know that that's, like, you might call that a reach if you drafted him at 45 and he was pre-ranked at 59, but what I'm saying here is, looking at the numbers, you have just as good a shot to go grab someone from the 50s as you did grabbing someone in the 40s. The pre-ranks, they are a subconscious deal that moves you in a way when you're drafting, but that's why it's such a big deal to, again, once you get to a certain number, and this most recent year it looks like that number is about 45, really start to make up your own lists from that point and basically just ignore what they've got listed in front of you.
Exactly. And feel free when your time is up and you're looking down the list and you're like, I don't like this guy, don't like this guy, don't like this guy. Don't feel bad about going 10 to 15 spots down for someone that you like and you know is going to be consistent.
I'm going to throw a couple numbers out again, and I'm going to talk about this repeatedly throughout the offseason. I had a running per 10 number, basically like how, what was the average, I'm trying to think of the right way to describe this without it getting too convoluted. The average difference between pre-rank and final rank of the last 10 players off the board. So running per 10 is what I'm calling it. First round was 4.7. By the end of the second round, it was 10. Third round was 11.5. Fourth round was minus 10.5, which is all very reasonable. Basically, what that's saying is, it has an average miss of about 10, but that's not crazy. And that's basically saying, you still have a better chance of taking somebody pre-ranked 35 than taking somebody pre-ranked 45. But by number 49, that number becomes minus 38. So basically at the 50 mark, the average landing place for these guys is about minus 88, roughly.
Well, I wonder what that number would be like if you took out the two Denver guys. Because those
two
guys,
lower.
I think, absolutely killed it.
Yes, it did. Completely destroyed it. But if you start at 51 with Ricky Rubio, it starts to elevate again. Ricky Rubio was a minus 83. Taurean Prince was a minus 76. Dragic was a minus 127. Gordon Hayward was a minus 60. Ingles was a minus 43. Lou Williams was a minus 41. This is all on a per-game basis again. Jeff Teague was a minus 65. So there's a run in there of just giant whiffs around Rob Covington, who, when healthy, was top 20, and obviously he missed half the season. And then Vooch, who was a first-round guy. And those were really the only two wins between pre-rank 48 and pre-rank 63. So there's the variance in there is insane. Oddly enough, it actually goes down to a minus 18 in the 70 to 80 range. So you actually had a better shot of finding somebody close to their pre-rank value between 70 and 90 than you did between 40 and 70. I mean, this is crazy stuff, and all it really tells you is, throw out a lot of the numbers that are being printed in front of you. The projections from some of these big box sites are completely insane and out of their minds. But I got off topic there. The point, I think, is if you go with known commodities, provided they're not 35 to 37 years old, through the first 2 or 3 rounds, I still feel very strongly, and it sounds like you agree on this point, build that nice, safe foundation, and then take your shots in the 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 round range.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I mean, it even works for Roto. I mean, just to give you an idea of how I went, not Roto, sorry, in auction. In auction, my first guy was Kemba Walker, and he was my most expensive player at $37. I sat out while everybody spent crazy amounts of money for some of these top guys, and it allowed me to get a really solid foundation of guys. My top 3 picks were Kemba, Middleton, Bledsoe. Then I went Clay, Miles Turner, Lou Williams.
Wow,
I mean,
that's
really
great.
Solid foundation. And Kemba was 37, Middleton was 27, Bledsoe 14, Clay 23, Turner 21, and Lou 12. I mean, just all guys I know are going to produce and won't hurt me.
I love it. I have so much more on this topic that I want to cover, but I can feel that my vocal cords are about to decompose. I got a little bit too excited. That's the lesson to be learned.
It means that we're having a good time, Dan.
I know. Too good of a time. Listen, you and I aren't going to talk for a week on this podcast. What do you think is going to happen in the playoffs between now and then?
I think the Clippers will get eliminated. I won't cry because I know it's coming. I think that we'll see Denver win Game 6 because I think they're smart enough to know that they can't let this go any longer. And I think the Rockets are going to knock off the Jazz. and then
Yeah.
we'll see the playoffs start on Saturday or Sunday.
What do you think about Boston, Milwaukee? Any thoughts on that one?
I like Milwaukee. I still don't trust Boston. I do think that Boston's more talented than some people give them credit for. I mean, as long as they have Kyrie, the guy is a playoff performer, and he's playing 37, 38 minutes, which is exactly what it needs to be. But I just think Milwaukee's too good. I'm not sure who's going to stop Giannis on Boston. That's my only problem, because Horford's too slow. I don't know who else you can put on him.
Yeah. Milwaukee's defense has consistently impressed me this year. They're just so long and powerful, and Brook Lopez was, such a great signing. I'm so upset with the Lakers at that one.
That was so bad. So bad.
Brutal. He's the perfect fit. He's amazing for them, and he's an incredible rim protector. I feel like somehow he got overlooked all season long in fantasy circles. He was number 32 in 9-cat this year. He averaged 2.2 blocks per game, and he didn't kill you in field goal percent. Everybody figured he would just step out and shoot only threes, which, I mean, he mostly did. But he shot 45%. Yeah, he made 37% of his threes this year. He was incredible. He was the guy that everybody drafted the previous year when he was in LA, and then he stunk for 4 of the 6 months that year. And he came roaring back this season. He was in a perfect scenario. He got drafted in the 70s. I mean, he's another good example of, if you have a pick at 55, you actually could have gone back and taken Brook Lopez this year, and it would have been a good selection if you just didn't like the guys in between. I know I'm looping into another topic again, but Brandon, next week I really want to talk about the idea of draft day, because now we've talked about how far you can reach safely. It sort of comes down to more of a mental game, right? Where you're trying to figure out who's actually going to get back to you. So let's talk about that next week. Deal?
Deal.
Yeah, perfect. Before I totally fall apart, Brandon Marcus, thank you, my good man.
Hey, your voice sounds great, and I'm really proud of you for doing this, even through a tummy ache, and getting through this podcast. I know it took a lot, and there's no one that gets sick more than you.
I know.
We're going to send you to the hospital, and what we'll do is we'll just put you in there with all the sick people. You'll get every single disease possible, and then you'll be ready to go next basketball season.
I really liked the way that idea started, and I really disliked the way that idea ended. I thought you were going to put me in like the positive pressure rooms where the air just consistently blows out of the room, so I never catch anybody else's illnesses.
Get you immune to everything.
Yeah, you're putting me in the negative pressure room where you're just sucking in everybody else's gross, disgusting air. I don't want it. No, keep your poo air away from me. He's Brandon Marcus. I'm Dan Besbris. Have a wonderful Wednesday, everybody. Adrian and Coach, I believe, have now switched to Fridays, so Neil will be back with you again. He's co-host TBD. He's got his pick of the litter coming up on tomorrow's Fantasy NBA Today. I will be back, perhaps at full strength. I hope. God help me. By Monday. We'll talk to you then. So long, everybody.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.